All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the April meeting, right? We're at time. Everybody shows at time. 9:15, right? Getting started. I think we are streaming as well as we have folks here in the room. 9:15 is social hour. When do we actually start? 10. All right. Well, we're going to stop this recording, and we're going to let people start the social hour. Sure. So, how's that? Can I delete this recording? All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the April 2021 division meeting for the Nutmeg division. This is also technically our annual meeting, which we're required to do once a year. We missed the first quarter by a little bit, but not much. I figure it's plus or minus 20 days, right? Come on, you got to give me a couple weeks here. So we'll also go through all that stuff. We are live streaming now on the pre-conference call, so there are people who are here as we're speaking here in the room. This is also a in-person meeting, so we are here in the Cheshire United Methodist Church doing our socially distant meeting, which I'm happy to have people and get to talk to people and have them face-to-face, so thank you for joining us. So I am obviously Jeff Hankey, I'm the superintendent. We will go through a couple slides here quickly, just kind of division business stuff. I did spice it up again since this is Cheshire. We don't normally meet in Cheshire. I put some pictures in here of the local area that you haven't seen before. I did this last time on the February meeting, but I found some other pictures, so I put them in here for this April meeting. I've also found since the last time we had it that Cheshire only really had two industries, and one of them is the Copeland Company, which you see here, which made latex. They have a different name today, but they still make latex. They're just not rail served. If you use the rail-to-trail linear trail here in town, you can actually walk right by it. Copeland was actually the last section that they made of the trail because it's pretty wet over there. And Copeland somehow got the rights to the right-of-way right next to their building, and they wouldn't let the trail go right next to their building, so they had to get creative, and it's actually like a little bridge going through the wet area. It's actually like a little elevated trail to make up for this post. Also, most interesting thing I've seen, this picture in 1994 you see here. I don't know why the Illinois Central Gulf dominated all these photos, because I don't think of the Illinois Central Gulf as having anything to do with Connecticut. But the ICG cars are the absolute, and they're still lettered ICG. These aren't re-tagged cars that somebody else owns. These are still railroad-owned cars. So you see a waffle-sided boxcar there and then a regular boxcar next to it. So we've done the division mingle. We are going to do the division business. We do have an election today. Nobody's running an election of two different positions. Yeah, Ron wants to. It's not two elections, Ron. It's one election with two positions. So hopefully it's going to be neck and neck, but hopefully Art and I get reelected. We'll see how it comes up to do it. And then we got a couple of clinics, and we did set up for a virtual layout tour today, which really is a video presentation that Don will share with us at the end. So where are we today? We're going to go through the general news, the NER news, membership, a little bit on finances, and then you can see what the new business includes doing the election. This is a little, I know the New Haven guy is going to love anytime you see a little switcher in New Haven. Rolling it back, though, this is 1963. Again, very short train, but pretty interesting right down here. This is part of the linear trail today. As well. This is that same line. Those who didn't join us last time, I did announce last time. If you haven't heard, I'm going to tell you again. 2021 National Convention was canceled completely, not rescheduled. It's done. Bye-bye. Boom. Blew it up. No more. So that means the calendar stays the same. So the 2022 convention is the same, everything that it was supposed to be. Same time, same location. I believe the 2021 one was the one out by like Santa Barbara or something. It was out in California. So they just missed it. They're just done. They passed, and so 2022 we keep going ahead. Train shows, we do have a way to check for train shows in the local area, and I include the local areas to be all of New England. So right now we don't have any on the calendar that have said they are going to have their train show until August. And I would consider at this point anything that's on the calendar for August to be tentative. So we'll wait and see as we get closer. But I did want to provide for anybody who's in the division here to let you know what train shows are being scheduled between now and the next meeting. There are none. Everyone that was on the calendar has been canceled or rescheduled later in the year that is not until at least August. All right? And then you guys like running passenger trains. This is a Cheshire passenger train back same year, 1963. I think the guy took the same. Just stood by the line, and one passenger train came by, one freight train came by. It said New Haven marked passenger car there. Okay, so what about the region? If you haven't checked it out, the December 2020 NERX is on YouTube. It is a massive amount of content. I think it's about 15-ish hours of videos on all sorts of clinic. It's great. It's been up there for a while. Because now the April one just happened. We moved this meeting a week because of the NERX, right? NERX was last weekend, the 10th and 11th. It is already up on YouTube as well. So if you want to see the great clinics and things they put on for NERX, feel free to go look at that. Some really good layout tours too, where folks gave a virtual tour of their layout. So good stuff. We're still marching our way towards the Mill City Convention, October 8th through the 11th of 2021. So that was the 2020 convention location that got pushed to 2021. So, you know, God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll still be able to have that in October. That means us, pound on the table, where we're actually going to need Nutmeg Division support, help, volunteers, serious effort. It means our convention is going to be 2022. So I'm pushing to make sure my tour's over by then, and whoever the next guy is gets stuck with it. And I'm just kidding. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and 2022. Okay? Membership. So Ron gave me the most recent numbers. As of March, we're actually at 167, not 174. We have 8 that are possibly not in good standing. What does that mean? That means their expiration time is either 30 or 60 days overdue. We have one family that is the 60 days overdue. It's 4 people from the same family. So if you see this, hear this, read this, please go in and pay your dues so that you make sure you're in good standing. The other, for the picture inset, by the way, if you didn't know, the other industry in Cheshire was County Lumber, which sat a little ways down the road from the Copelands. It's a different year. It's 1987. The other one was 1994. Still 2 ICG boxcars. What is going on with the ICG boxcar? I have no idea. But if anybody wants to model, they got double door boxcars, the second one, by the way. If anybody wants to, you know, model Cheshire in the late 80s, early 90s, you got to go buy some ICG boxcars. The positions. Officially today, Art is still technically vacant because we haven't voted him in. We put him in as the acting guy, so he's going to take that position over, assuming somebody votes for him. He'll probably vote for himself. I would like, we'll talk about the open positions, but James is still holding down 2 hats. You know, I'd like to obviously do something there. Clinic coordinator and social media were both vacant. We'd like someone to step up and take those as well. But those are the positions who are running the division. Finances, James let us know we have $2,877. We did receive our $114 from the region, so that was good. Luckily, not doing any expenses. We do have a, if anybody's here wants to donate, you can donate on the way out. Probably the biggest expense we have coming still, we've made some progress towards reviewing what's available for a email and marketing service. That is essentially to help Ron and his, if you didn't know, Ron is quietly puts together 7 hours worth of effort to mail out every email you get due to the limitations of his email service. So we are actually looking to do Constant Contact as a email service. And actually, Chuck, who's on the phone, I know I saw Chuck, you saw your name on the list of attendees. Chuck and Ron, Chuck uses it already for the region. If you wonder all those really cool looking emails you get from the region with the cool banners and the pictures and the NERX stuff you got, that's Constant Contact, and that's Chuck doing it. And so we obviously want to bring Ron into that movie and make his life a heck of a lot easier sending out emails. You know, I'd like Ron to be able to send an email in 5 minutes instead of 7 hours, if everybody feels the same way. So we'll get that hopefully ironed out, up and running here between now and the next meeting. And then if anybody knows, for Brooksville Road in Cheshire here is one of the rather large roads, crosses directly the path today. But that's it as a New Haven caboose. So hey, Grand Trunk had a, see? Somebody has a different boxcar besides ICG. That's good to see. The Grand Trunk boxcar. That's probably because it was 1963. I don't think ICG existed in 1963. I think it was IC at that time, and then Gulf Mobile in Ohio was the other half. Yes.
Quick one before we move on to the next.
Go ahead.
Well, our taxes have been filed for 2020.
We filed our taxes?
Yeah.
Woo! Getting a refund?
Well,
no.
No. The state's going to make it once they're $50.
$50.
$50.
Woo!
And with the federal, all they have to do is file.
Right.
So, but for the federal filing, there's a small window. If you do it early, they get district bill.
Okay.
So I had to wait until April.
All right.
So.
Thank you. For those, I don't know how the sound's coming through to the people who are on the phone and streaming this, but James let us know that he's filed both the federal and the state tax returns for us for this year, and the state one includes us paying $50. The federal one includes us paying nothing. That's good. So comms part, if you haven't noticed, the Facebook page is there. It's pretty easy to find, Nutmeg Division NMRA. We do post the link to the YouTube page there, but we also post the announcements for each of these meetings there. And then if other members want to put content up, you're actually, I think, eligible to put content up if you're just a member of the Facebook page. It's not restricted in any way. So I do get noticed, I get a notice of when people are doing it. So I am happy to report that more people are going on that. You know, each week I'll get more people. It's not huge numbers, don't get me wrong. We're not setting the world on fire, but people are going on to the Facebook page. People are using it. More people are following it. More people are joining it, which is good. It was pretty stale for a couple of years. It looked like before anybody had really used it a lot, but it's up and running again. The YouTube page, if you weren't here at the last meeting, we did post the October 2020 meeting video on there. The February 2021 video is on there. We did not have a meeting in December of 2020, which means as of now, the YouTube video page there has all the videos that we've ever taken. That will include the recording of this meeting. I'll post that to YouTube when we're done. So we'll put the April meeting up there as well. They are getting views, which is good, which means our members who may have something to do today or can't join us today are following up on the content later, which is nice to see. So again, Nutmeg Division NMRA for YouTube, pretty easy to find. So not a lot of people want to use those 3 words for their channel. Yes?
Don just sent the message that he sees the screen, but he has no sound.
He doesn't have sound, but Chuck had sound. I already did a sound check with Chuck. Don, you check your speakers and things. If it's something internally to you, it sounds like everybody else has sound but you.
Yeah.
Well, at least for me, Don, a lot of times I have to change the volume of my speakers for sound to come through for some reason. Just changing the volume from 50% to 75, it starts playing the sound. So you probably could through my phone if you could figure out how to do it. No? Okay. Another thing is I want to thank Chuck Gray, who's here today. Chuck, good to see you. Chuck has volunteered to be our webmaster and has got the login information and understands enough about websites, much more than I do, to go through the website and start to update it. So there is a laundry list of things that Chuck has already updated on the website. The links are correct. The brass hats folks are correct. He's putting the meeting notices up there. So we're working to now. I'll say the beauty of the website. We're going to change the green colors and go to that's the old logo. If those of you don't remember, so we're getting rid of the old logo, going to this new kind of black, yellow, and maroon logo we have now. So Chuck's working on that. He's done a great job so far, so thank you, Chuck, for volunteering. Thanks for doing the work. Chuck calls and tells me what he's doing. He uses like 40 words. I have no idea what he's talking about the who's he, what's it, and the what's a majig, and the okay, good. Please just keep good on you, Chuck. So we're going to possibly work to see also some of that data on there is from many years ago. Try to have maybe an archive. And then probably something that's worth talking about, and I don't know if anybody here knows, because I don't, was what the value of the member-only part of the web page was. Because if you actually see the inset of the website there on the bottom left, you can see the login information with a username and a password. But I don't know what it protects. I don't know what content we wanted to put behind a login that people couldn't see on our website. But right now, I don't know the value of that.
Only thing I could think of was personal information.
Yeah, I think for the section for if you're requesting help or something from the organization, if you want to help with your layout, the place where members can post. I think that was behind the login so that if non-members couldn't see personal information. Something like that. That's the only thing. It doesn't get used very often.
I can't. Yeah. So Chuck's smart enough to be able to see when like the last people are that logged in. Yeah, it's not getting used. Right. I mean, the whole website probably wasn't updated since 2018. Right.
Oh yeah, it really hasn't been.
So Chuck's updating it now, so a lot of it's current today. But that's interesting because I'm not sure if people want to continue that or not, but it's probably something we should talk about going forward. I mean, we're not going to take that section down right now, but it's probably something that we have other things that are a higher priority to fix on the website first, but we'll work our way through that. So I did kind of foot stomp the open positions already. Layout coordinator. Now this is pretty easy in the COVID world, right? Because layout coordinators are virtual, right? Another great opportunity for a layout coordinator is to reach out and coordinate with the region and get the points of contact of the other layout coordinators, and then see if they have virtual layouts, because they don't have to be local anymore. That's the part we got to stress.
Don Wait is our layout coordinator.
Donza?
Yes.
I thought he's the clinic coordinator. Huh?
We don't have a clinic.
Oh, I thought Don was clinics.
No.
Oh, my fault, Don. Sorry if you're on the phone. You're like, dude, this is my job. All right. I always thought you were clinics, Don. Sorry. I'm gonna mentally strike that, and I'll start over. So, same thing applies for clinics. How's that? How's that for an option? Huh? Thinking on your feet. So, same thing with clinics. We need to, get clinics, and in this day and age, we're going to prove it to you today, right? Because our first clinic is from New Jersey. So Chuck's going to give his clinic, and he's not even close to where we're sitting here in Cheshire, Connecticut. I wish John was here. Unfortunately, John has he's doing a COVID test, and then he's going to hopefully come in late. John's running the Constitution Committee for us. We need to review the bylaws and the Constitution this year. It is the once every 10 years review of that. It should not take long, I wouldn't think, as it's a total of 3 pages between the two documents. New business, we talked a little bit already about the convention hosting in 2022. Ken May is our guy for that. they're basically just holding to make sure that Mill City happens, and then it'll kind of kick into high gear come the fall time frame to get going on our convention. All those were done. Down to June 12th for our next meeting. If you haven't marked your calendar yet, June 12th, the next meeting. August 14th, the one after that. Then we have the convention, October 9th and December 11th. We already took care of the spot award. I should have updated that on that slide. I'm sorry. If anybody knows Cheshire, the ball and socket right there, look at that picture, huh? That's like a turn of the century picture. You see the steam engine on the right. The ball and socket today is kind of closed, but they're trying to convert it to, I think, an ice cream shop's going in there. The path walks right by this as well. It's actually called Railroad Avenue, if you want to know, like the street next to it. But it's another historic building here in Cheshire, and what used to have, if you look closely, it's almost like, I think there's 4 tracks in that picture, more than I ever thought there were in Cheshire. All right, it's the big time. Let's see if Art makes it. So nobody's contesting this election, so we debated at the board meeting as to whether or not we even needed to have an election. But technically, somebody needs to cast a vote, I guess, to actually account for it. So let me explain what we're doing. And I think Ron did a good job in his email, but you may not have understood what was going on. Through a series of turnovers, with Andrew leaving and Kaylee coming on board and Kaylee leaving, the position that was originally due to be filled didn't get filled because of COVID, which is really Andrew's spot. Andrew was the last one elected to that spot. Kaylee was only nominated to fill it on an acting, and then she left. And it expired. So right now, what we did as a board is we temporarily put Art in it so that we'd have a third board member. But Art needs to be officially elected for a term that should have started last year. Okay? So when you elect Art or vote for Art, you're going to give Art a 2-year term. Because Art's term should have started in 2020. It's a 3-year term. His expires in 2023. That'll clean up all the mess associated with Andrew, Kaylee, and Art, and everybody else on that board seat. My seat, I was elected to the board in 18, and my tour ends now. I'm willing to do it for another 3 years, which would put me to 2024. So this election is actually for my seat on time. The fact that I'm the superintendent doesn't matter because one of the 3 board members is always the superintendent. So that people didn't know how the division ran, that's how the division runs. So I guess I will start with nominating Art for the position that expires in 2023. Seconded by James. So we'll take a vote of everybody who wants to vote for Art for election. Art looks unanimous. It was touch and go for a while. We were wondering how it was going to be, but Art, it should make you feel good driving home today. Everybody voted for you, right? This is like North Korea. You got 100% of the vote. No, they get 105% of the vote in North Korea. All right. So now, for myself, I guess I don't think I can nominate myself, but I do put my name in the hat. So, does anybody want to? You got it? Thank you. Steve, just a second. Art seconded. So, voting for my position for director. Anybody want to vote for me? I didn't get as many votes as Art. That's not cool.
The director part is for the director?
Just a director, yeah.
Oh, okay, not superintendent.
Not super. You're not voting for me for superintendent, James? Okay, thanks. I got one less vote than Art because James didn't vote for me. I'm going to cry my way home. I'm going to be honest with you. This is not good.
Don't get lost.
So, thanks, James. I won't forget that. Also, another photo for you Guilford fans. I mean, I know there's some Boston and Maine Guilford guys out there. I always thought Guilford was kind of cool with the orange stripe. I kind of thought that was nice. Maybe that's why they used all the ICG cars, because it matches the locomotives. I don't know. But this is another 1994. This is obviously, they're going to the lumber yard. You can see I'm not sure those are center beam flat. Those look like just bulkhead flats at that point. But they're bright orange, which makes me think they're ICG, right? They're probably ICG too. So some sort of like desire in Illinois to have Connecticut wood. I don't know. But thank you for the election, Art. Congratulations. You're on till 23. I'll stay on till 2024. So we're back to having a. If you didn't know, the other one's John Gam. So John's ends in 2022. So next year we will vote for John Gam's position. If you're interested in having it, we'll talk to you next year. We did add a little section because normally when we have these, we have like a table and people put the things that they bring in. Art's the only one that actually brought it in today. But I asked the folks, if you would like to share your models, send me a picture and I'll put in a slide and we can talk about them. So these are things I've been working on. In the upper right hand is a what's called Consumers Fuel in Martinsburg, West Virginia. It's still there today. It was the only single coal car industry I've ever seen. Luckily, it happens to be like literally right on my lap. But they took a delivery of coal and really were like residential coal and propane dealer, which is pretty neat. So I scratch built that building. I told some of you about the story about rippling the window, and that's the window on the right-hand side there. I rippled that thing with the heat gun. Don't do that. I did finish, and I'm going to put a load on the Western Maryland pulpwood flat car. If you ever notice pulpwood, the difference is, you know, the pulpwood have the V bottom so that the pulpwood is on. And then something that I just do in batches is telephone poles. So I've been weathering and doing telephone poles. I got one of those Rick's kits where you can build them with 1, 2, 3, or like up to 6 cross things, and I have some places on my layout where the telephone poles have 5 or 6 cross beams, so I use that kit. They're pretty good detailed kits, neat little things to do. James, you want to talk about yours?
Okay, I made a replacement for Walter's frame to the freight elevator.
Okay.
This is for the Amherst Railway Society. Some of the guys there aren't the most gentle with buildings, and they tend to get crushed. And well, it's beyond repair at this point, so I'm building new ones.
Okay.
That's pretty much entirely scratch built. The silos themselves are PVC pipe.
Okay.
Good one crushing those.
Thought you were gonna say you actually poured it out of concrete to prevent it.
But
right.
it's gonna be pretty lit up like pretty lit up. I'm gonna put LEDs all over it, so nice.
Cool.
Yeah. Woo!
And this will be displayed at the next Big E?
I don't know.
Maybe? Hopefully?
Yeah.
Okay.
The next Amherst Railway Society.
The next Amherst, I just call it the Big E. Yes, the Amherst Railway Society show.
Right. If you call it the Big E, somebody from the Big E will come and whack you.
Okay.
So they don't like when you use that to call it that.
Okay. That's good. Art sent a couple pictures in, and he actually brought the model here on the bottom left of the, which I didn't even know they did. Tarp-covered auto rack carrying 2 auto cars, which is very interesting. Art, you want to talk about this?
Yeah. This was a big part of my build during COVID. Is I had 8 precision scale classic 5500 flat cars to be built, so I got after it and did 2 in the bulkhead design for lumber and wallboard delivery, and the 2 in the back, you can see they just have the wood superstructures for the auto rack. Those were custom built. I added the tie-down chain cans into the deck and the tie-down brackets to hold the chains, and just a few larger photos. You can see I just put the tarp on one of the cars, the other one on the workbench now getting finished up. And instead of using the traditional tissue paper with white glue to apply it, all the photos showed the cars being stretched really, really tight on the cars. And I wanted to try to replicate that, so I bought some of the plastic film from Home Depot for heat shrinking out your windows, if you don't have core windows, and glued that onto the superstructure on the perimeter, and used my wife's hair dryer out of heat gun because I didn't want to melt the car. And it stretches out really nice, and painted it up. And we'll see how that lasts.
And those who aren't here, because you're not in the room, it looks incredible. It really does. It's a magnificent idea to use.
That was in late 40s, up through the 50s. They used to, the car dealerships in Colorado and New Mexico weren't very large, so they maybe take 4 cars. So,
and these are narrow gauge cars too.
These were narrow gauge cars, so they ran as a pair generally. They take cars out, even up on the river and southern. There's pictures of them in the final year going out to Over, which is a community of about 100 people at that point. So somebody was still buying new cars.
I was about to say that they knew who was buying that car. They were
Exactly.
like, "Yeah, Bob's buying a car. It's coming tomorrow."
Well, to the dealership on spec. Nobody ordered it. Going there to the customer.
Okay, they look good.
Thank you.
Don, you're on. I don't know if you figured out the audio.
I think I have. Can you hear me?
We can, Don. Go ahead.
All right. This is a G-gauge water tank I'm putting together. I need more strip wood to finish the body of the tank. I cut the strip wood on my daughter's table saw, and the legs are 1/2 inch square, cut out of 3/4 pine. It's about 1/2 by 3/4 strips for the outside wrapper of the tank, and the scraps left from cutting 1/2 inch square leg stock out of the 3/4 pine is being used for the braces. I've since been to Lowe's and gotten some barn red paint for the tank and some brown for the legs, and have begun painting things. So inch by inch it's coming along. I have to get to my daughter's when she has the saw set up and cut the rest of the wood. It's the same size scale tank as the HO one is next to that HO tender. So it gives you some idea of the difference in bulk you get when you go from HO to G. That's my dad's old wooden folding carpenter's ruler at the bottom.
Yeah, you do get an idea of the size there, Don. Jesus. It's huge. It's huge.
And I didn't realize how heavy the tank was going to be with that wood. It's a lot of wood. And then there's joint cement for drywall filling the gaps between. And that thing is quite heavy.
Well, luckily you have this massive facility underneath it to hold it up, too. I mean, that's 1/2 inch square wood can handle a lot of weight.
Right. It's sort of interesting. It's crude lumber, you know, it was rough cut lumber. It wasn't sanded or anything for things like water tanks. So I just ran the wood through the saw, and I didn't sand the 1/2 inch square or any of the other pieces either.
Nice. Looks good. All right. We'll wait to see it when it's finished. It'll be great. So actually, the break is really pretty much just trying to make sure we know how to load and share and have Chuck show his clinic. If anybody didn't see a picture of the actual trolley line passing over the, if you don't know the history of Cheshire, I'll just explain it while we're getting Chuck queued up here. So the canal, is the water on the right-hand side of the photo there, was a hand-dug canal through the town, and there's lots of locks going between them. Lock 12 still exists here in town. You can go see what one of the locks looks like. Basically the towpath next to it, where you would tow the barges down the canal, turned into the railroad. And then as they made the trolley lines, I believe that's the trolley line that went to Naugatuck and over to the Notch store here in Cheshire. Don't know what date, but if you go on that path today, We still see those cement abutments. They all still exist there today on the canal. All right. Let me see if I know how to do this. This will be a miracle. Chuck, do you take?
No, you have to make me. I think you go into the attendees list.
Okay.
First of all, I think you need to stop sharing. Go into the attendees list and then make me a share. So if you click on the drop arrow on the right.
Yep.
Make me a presenter.
Oh yes, I want to switch to presenter. You betcha. Okay, do I need to do something else?
Nope.
Boom.
Now do you see my screen?
Your big fat clinic? Yes.
Yes. Yes. I just have to say two things. One, that tarp over the car, using that heat shrink, I thought that's brilliant. I've never heard of that. It looks fantastic. I wish I could see the car in person. And Don, I'm not sure you can call that strip wood in G scale. I think that's dimensional lumber at that point. All right, so my clinic is, I've been calling it my big fat clinic, and you know, and I saw in Ron's email and Jeff's notes as well that, you know, they call it basically, you know, it's a scale track, scale house, scale test cars, you know, very basic name, you know, and I give it a nice clever name for the clinic, and it kind of reminds me of some articles I wrote for RMC years ago, and I'd come up with a clever title for the article, and Bill Schomburg would reduce it back to, you know, the basics, like building a fan house for the mine, you know, and I'd have, you know, I had some clever title for it, and it just kind of reminded me of that. So I call my clinic the Big Fat Clinic, my Big Fat Clinic, or how to weigh cars like the prototype. Let's see here. So, you know, it's not about the NMRA's recommended practice of, you know, how much your car should weigh on your layout to have, you know, so that they operate properly. Instead, it really is about, you know, building a scale track, building a scale house, and I'll talk about scale test cars, and then how you can add the scale track to your operations. And what really happened is back in the 1900s, there really were no standards on how cars were weighed. So customers constantly were complaining and filing lawsuits that they were getting ripped off and being charged too much by the railroads for transporting commodities, because there really was no standard across the industry as to how cars were weighed. And then in 1913, the American Railway Association issued the track scale specifications and rules as a result of their findings. And what it did is it had all of these recommendations on the construction, operation, location, and the maintenance of track scales. In general, what railroads need to do is weigh commodities. You know, most things, a lot of things that the railroads transported, you knew what the weight was. You knew what the weight of the automobile was. You knew what the weight of appliances were. But when it comes to commodities like coal or iron ore or plastics or grain or steel and things like that, you don't necessarily know how much it weighs. So what you would do is typically there would be a scale located close to where the car was weighed or loaded. So that's really how this all kind of evolves as to why we need a scale track. So this is a photo of a portion of my layout, and this is really my colliery or coal mine on my layout. And this whole scene is the coal mine. And it stretches from, here's the scale house way over here, and then I've got my powerhouse and door thickener over here. So it's really, this is the whole mine. And since coal is a commodity, it needed to be weighed. But, you know, I never really thought about it until I started looking at Sanborn maps. And I was looking at Sanborn maps of all these coal mines and breakers that were located in the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania, the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area. And when you looked at the Sanborn maps, you know, this is the breaker right here, this huge structure here, you know, and it's sitting over the tracks, and this is where it would load the cars, the hoppers. When I zoomed in, I realized, hey, there's a scale here, and there's a scale down here. One would weigh the cars when they were empty, and one would weigh the cars when they were loaded. So this kind of got me started down the path of adding a scale house to my layout. So I needed to build the track first. So let's talk about that. when I'm very active in the NMRA Achievement Program. I'm close to getting my MMR. But one of the things I never thought about getting was the civil engineer until Fast Tracks came along. So with my Fast Tracks jig, I managed to build a crossover, and I managed to build a turnout. But I was kind of stumped as to what to build for the third element, for third track component that I needed. And knowing that I needed a scale track and seeing the form had scale track on there, it's like, oh, I'll just build a scale track. So it really became, it kind of solidified the ability for me to get my civil engineer by building the scale track. And really, this whole project has kind of helped me in several areas in the achievement program, in that I built the scale house and the pit, as well as the scale track, and then I also built this car, which I'll talk about. It's an idler car that I'll use in my scale track operations. And of course, after I built my scale track, it's typical with anything in my model railroading projects, and probably many of you have experienced the same thing, is shortly after you build it, after you've thought through the whole process of how you're going to build this thing, somebody publishes an article in one of the magazines that could have saved you a lot of trouble. But I built mine in about, I think, 2015, and this came out in 2018. So if you want to find a way to build your own scale track, and this is using a Fast Tracks jig, it's a good article. It's a different way than how I built mine, and I wish this article was out before I built mine. But I did use a Fast Tracks jig. Obviously the Fast Tracks jig is right here in the center. I also used the point form and the stock aid. You need your NMRA gauge. I also used HO scale and HON3 track gauges, and then obviously you have your rails and your ties that you need for the model. The way I started building this is I used both sides of the jig. So I kind of laid out the stock rail first and the ties, and you can kind of see that the ties expand until they reach this length, and for 5 ties, that's that length, and this is the location of where the scale pit is going to be. So the first thing I did is I laid down a stock rail, and I soldered to each one of the tracks except for the throw bars. So those are not, the stock rail's not soldered to that. And then I created the point rails. So this is really for the through track. So this is the through track on the scale, and I created a track for that of the proper length that I needed, so that it could be soldered to the throw bars. And this is soldered to the throw bar. Next step is, okay, now I needed to create another point rail, just like the first one, same length and everything, only I needed to space it, narrower. And I thought, well, the best thing I thought that I could use for that is an HON3 gauge. Now, unfortunately, an HON3 gauge it's designed for code 70 rail, and I use code 83 rail, so I kind of had to widen the little gaps in between there, just carefully widened it. And then I set that on the first point rail to allow me to, to get the same equal space along the full length, so I could solder the second point rail. So this is one of the rails. This is the point rail for the scale track. But I did not solder it at this point to the throw bars. And then the last rail to put on is the stock rail for the scale track. And this one I used the regular HO gauges to help me install that. And once I had all of them in place, soldered in place, then I could, use, my gauges and things to solder the point rail from the scale track to the throw bar. And this is what the whole track looks like when it's all together. It's not in the scene, obviously, yet, but it's all together. And then I checked it thoroughly with the NMRA gauge. And then after I installed it on the layout before any scenery, this is what it looks like. So I inserted all the rail ties in between, and then I built my scale pit, and then this is the foundation for the scale house. So that brings me to the scale house. So a scale house is there's on the Library of Congress website, there's a great series of drawings and photos of a scale house that used to exist in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And what I like about it is it really has a thorough drawing of all the components of the scale. And the first thing I'll point out is how this thing, I'll kind of walk through how this whole thing works. But you see there's four rails here. So one of them is the through track and the other one is the scale track. The tracks that are closer to the scale house, which is where this is located, the rails closest to that are the scale track. And they are set on a beam, and you can kind of see the beams here, and the beams rest on what are called the main levers. So there's 4 sets of main levers. Then the main levers are connected to what are called extension levers. There are center extension levers, these 2 here, and then there are end extension levers. Then they transfer the weight to a transverse lever, which then moves the weight towards the scale house, and you can kind of see the transverse lever here. And then there's an up and down motion to, let me move this out of the way, whatever. So it transfers the weight up into the scale house where the weigh beam is located. So that's how, all of these components come together. And the other thing that I'll point out is that you'll notice there's a smokestack here in the scale house. And that's not necessarily there to keep the scale operator warm. Instead, what it's doing, most likely what it's doing is keeping the pit warm. It's keeping the equipment warm because that's more valuable to the railroad, and they need to have the pit operating properly to weigh the commodities as they come through. So it's not there for the scale house operator, it's there for the equipment. So here's a photo that I found in this book, this Freight Terminals and Trains, that you can get on the NMRA website. It's a photo of a pit in the process of being constructed. And here you can see these beams that run the length of the pit, which rest on these main levers. And here you see the extension levers, and then this is the transverse lever. Here's a close-up of the main lever, and this is one of the extension levers here above it, but this is a close-up of it. This is the Scranton pit. Here's another photo of the Scranton pit, and here's the extension levers again. And then you may wonder about the weigh beam. The weigh beam, I didn't have a photo of it from the Scranton site, but I found this weigh beam online, and it's in Paducah, Kentucky. I don't know if it was used for rail operations, though. But the reason I liked it is because it's a nice broadside, and then I could scratch build a model of this very easily with this nice viewpoint. And it kind of looks like a scale that you would see in the doctor's office. It's just much bigger. So how does this work? So the levers have a fulcrum or a pivot point, and they also have a load point and a power point. The closer the fulcrum is to the load point, the farther the power point will need to be in order to counterbalance the weight you place on the load point to keep it in balance. So if you think about it, if you have a 12-inch ruler and you hold it at the 6-inch mark, it's balanced. You don't need anything else to balance it. But if you move your finger away from that 6-inch mark, you need to put some weight on one end of that ruler in order to counterbalance it. And that's really what these levers do for you, is that they're not on center, they're off center to counterbalance the weight that's being put on it. And they're all, you multiply all of these ratios together, and that indicates that the whole scale in this example, and I don't think these numbers are accurate, but in this example, it takes about an 8-pound weight on the weigh beam to counterbalance a 55-ton hopper. So that's why you have a main lever, the extension levers, the transverse levers, all of these different levers in the mechanism with all these different ratios, so it makes it easy for the scale operator to weigh a car. Now here's an image of a scale house that I really liked. This is what inspired me to build the scale house that I have. And I came across this in my search on the internet. This is actually a Santa Fe prototype. And if you look for Santa Fe scale houses, you're going to see they had this as their standard design. There's many images in various forms or in shape and forms that of this type of scale house. It really inspired me. What I liked about it was just the bay window. I like that there's a bell in between the two windows on the front, and I also like the sign on it, so never allow the engine on the scale. Then, a few years ago, my parents were living in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and I happened to see this structure just sitting not far off the highway. And it was there, I don't know if it was there for a future railroad museum or a planned railroad museum or what they plan to do, but this is a Pennsylvania railroad design, and it came from the Northumberland yard. They even brought the way beam with it and set it on this property. And this scale house actually was the focus of a couple articles, one by Harold Russell and another by Harold Geisel, over the years in Model Railroader and other issues or other magazines. And I wish, again, I wish I found these articles way before I drew my own plans for the scale house, because it would have saved me a lot of time. But in the end, I drew my own plans, and then I came across these articles later. Now, not all of the scale houses have to be, sophisticated scale houses. This is the one that was in Scranton. It reminds me of something kids would build as a fort, in their use. It really was a basic structure. The door is always going to be off to the side. It's never going to come out to the front of the scale for safety reasons. But I'm actually surprised the windows aren't a little bit larger to be able to see. But it's a very basic structure. It doesn't have to be a complex structure. And this is my scale house. And again, it follows that Santa Fe design. I actually have lights, LED lights on it, lamp posts or lights on either end of the building to help the operator read the car. It's not facing down, it's facing towards the car. And then I have a light inside so you can see the operator and the way beam. And this is what the inside looks like. So here's my operator pushing the weight on the beam. There's actually a trap door at his feet. Because the operator would have to have access to the pit, and that was the access point. So let's talk about scale test cars. Railroads in the beginning, they were constructing their own scale test cars. And here's an example of one. I mean, I forget how old this was. This is like close to the turn of the century in the 1900s. It's really early on. But railroads built their own. And so this was kind of a nice, really neat example of what and it has a familiar shape to the very common one, which we'll show you in a future slide. Chuck Davis wrote an article years ago about constructing his own scale test car, and he probably did this for the Achievement Program as well. But the Lehigh Valley also made their own scale test cars, a couple of them. So it was kind of an interesting car that he built for his railroad, his Lehigh Valley Railroad. And this is the one everybody associates with, that they know very well. It's the Baldwin Southwark of Philadelphia. They created this car, and you notice it doesn't have any really sharp edges to it. And that's the reason why. I mean, it has the slopes and has curved edges is to prevent any dirt buildup or any debris piling up on the car, because that will change the weight of the car. The car also typically only has a handbrake. It doesn't have air brakes on it because that will also change the weight of the car. So and they also traveled on the ends of the car, so probably right before the caboose or at the the second to the last car on the train. And the reason for that is because it only has two axles. It's not a very stable car in transporting. So you had to transport it at a very slow speed. Train operators hated having these on the car because you were going at a very slow speed, and it was all for protection purposes. And the other reason had it at the tail end of the car, but not necessarily the last car. If it became uncoupled, at least there was one car attached to it with air brakes that could stop it. And in 2005, Joe Pennington wrote a nice article about the car. There were no plans in the article, but it's a really nice article on the history of this car. And to get around transporting it at the end of the car, the Canadian railroads had a nifty way of, and I think this is Canadian National, yes, had a nifty way of transporting the cars, in that they would load them onto a flat car. And they probably use this for any maintenance of way type of equipment, not just scale test cars, but they would load them onto the car. This is a folding ramp on one end to get it off the rails or back onto the rails, and then there's a winch down here to pull them up onto the car. So I thought this was a really clever way of transporting them, and it'd be a really interesting model, but it would be a bear of a model to build. And then Bachmann Trains came out a couple of years ago with this car. I have to be honest, this is probably the most freewheeling car I have on the layout. I could put it on a very slight grade, and the car will start rolling. So it's a very freewheeling. And I lettered it for my railroad, the Wyoming Valley. And a little tongue-in-cheek, I named it Tiny. But you'll notice that the placards on the railings, they differ from railroad to railroad. And I really like this car, and I wanted one for my railroad. So I was really happy when Bachmann came out with this. Microtrains and N-Scale has a version. Stewart used to have a model, and I happened to come across one at the MAWA convention. Somebody in the audience, her father had passed away, and she has been selling a lot of his equipment. And so she offered to give me his kit. And so, yeah, I happily took it, and I built it, and I named it for her dad. Her dad's name is Joe, so I called it Little Joe. Walther's had a model. This is out of production, but you can probably find this on eBay. But to be honest, I actually like the Bachmann kit better. And then Maxon Corporation, in 1971, they came out with, they filed a patent for a new type of scale test car. And what was nice about this is this looks like a regular rail car with, the two trucks, and they can be transported without any issues. But what makes it unique is it has its own engine, so the scale operator can move the car back and forth without having to rely on an engine crew in an engine to move the car. Because what they would do is put it on the scale, and they would test the scale at various locations on the scale, on both ends, in the center. They would when they were testing the scale, they would do that. So it required an engine crew to move the scale test car. So that was kind of, a lot of labor to do one thing. So now the scale operator could just move the car on its own. The other thing it had are these jacks, and it would actually jack the car up off the rails, so the wheels aren't even on the rails at this point, and so all the weight of the car is concentrated on these 4 jacks. CMR Products came out with a resin model of it. I heard there's a lot of controversy about this. I'm not going to get into that, but to be honest, I wouldn't even bother buying it because it really is basic shapes that you could really scratch build easily, I think, with styrene. Then what railroads started doing is they started repurposing cars that had no longer life as a revenue car. They would repurpose them for scale test tracks. And there's actually right here, it actually says scale something there. Right? It says something about the scale, but they used this to test the scales. And actually, Rapido Trains came out with a model of that car. So and it actually says scale monitored car, I think is what it says there on the side. So you could buy that and use that for your railroad. But there were also covered hoppers. This is CSX, so there you go, Jeff. This is what you need for yours. Intermountain planned to come out with a scale test car as a hopper, but they actually canceled this one. But here you can see hoppers in use. They just have I don't know what they had inside as weight, but then they would cover it so that it wouldn't fill up with water or whatever. This one's a nice little ore car that has been repurposed. A gondola, very similar to the hopper that you saw earlier. And here's several hoppers or several gondolas that are scale test cars being hauled. But they also use tank cars. So here's a scale monitor car for the Union Pacific. And this is actually another scale monitor car. And probably the most unique car that I came across is one made out of concrete. I really thought this was clever, but actually what it is after I studied this, you'll see on the next slide, this is a repurposed car. The frame was sacrificed from a car that was no longer in revenue service. So it's basically a concrete slab, but I think it's sitting on the frame of an old tank car because you can see the cradle for the tank car that was there. So this is after they scrapped it. So a pile of rubble and the old frame sitting here. Now I thought this was really an interesting car. This is the federal government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They're going out to different sites to measure the scales for grain and whatever else they need to for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I thought this was kind of clever, is that it's a car within a car. Here's the scale test car, but it was hauled inside this long car that had its own hoist, and each one of these weights is 10,000 pounds. So it's a nice way of being able to transport the scale test car without the restrictions of the speed or placement in the car. And I thought this was a very modern take on the scale test car, but actually I'm wrong, because in 1913, the U.S. Department of Commerce had a very similar car. Here you see the hoist, here you see the scale test car, very similar. So again, 1913 when these standards first came into being. So let's talk about scale operations. Now that you have a scale test, a scale track, a scale house, and a scale test car, let's put it into operations. Boulder Creek Engineering has probably I thought was a very cool little system here. It doesn't actually weigh your car. Actually, what it does is it senses that there's a car on the scale with just a sensor in between the rails. But what it has is a little switch here, an ABC switch, that you can define 3 different ranges of weights. So if it's a hopper, you might want to define the weight range for hoppers under A. Under B, you might want to, for your gondolas. For C, you might have, for covered hoppers or something like that. So you could have 3 completely different weight ranges. And what they tell you to do is actually define your weight range as being a range that ends slightly overweight. So you could end up with some cars that fail or are overweight and you need to take some action for it. So you might have, maybe your weight limit is 110,000 pounds and you have 120,000 pounds as the upper limit. So if a car comes through and it weighs 118,000 pounds, then that car can't go on your railroad. You have to take some action to send it back to the shipper and relieve some of the weight that's in the car. So it's kind of a neat way of doing it. Now, they used to have both a digital and analog version. I'm not sure if that's still true if they only have the digital, but they did have both at one time, and it's about $100 to put that system in. On NMRA-X last year, somebody gave a presentation on Arduinos, and one of the viewers posted some photos and some comments saying, hey, I use an Arduino for a scale track on my layout. And he actually has a real scale hooked up, and here he has a little digital readout display on the scale house, and he's put in quite a bit of complex electronics. Here you can see the Arduinos, and it has it all connected so that he can tell if what the weight of the car is. And he has a table and everything loaded into the Arduino to help him in his weighing of car process. I thought that was pretty clever. So what's important? You see these things all on the side of every car: the capacity, the load limit, and the light weight. So the capacity really is just your normal maximum load weight of the car. But what's really, what I found is really important is what's the load limit and what's the light weight. So the load limit is what's the weight of the load that's inside the car. That's the maximum weight that car can have for a load. And then the light weight is what is the weight of the car when it's empty. So when you add those two together, that's the maximum weight that that car should have. So when it comes across the scale house and if it weighs more than that, then you need to take some action. So for those of you who use car cards, you may wonder, well, how can I put this into my operations? And what some people do is they add the gross weight to the car card, and then add the scale as a destination in the waybill. You can add slips of paper with the weight to the car, or weight to the car card or the waybill packet, and you can color code the slips of paper as to whether it is overweight or not. And then the other option is to write the weight directly on the waybill, which honestly I don't think anybody would do that because you're defacing the waybill, and then you have to create a new waybill later. What I use is JMRI, Operations Pro, so I figured out a way to add into my switch list that when a hopper has a load, that it needs to get weighed. So when it has a load, when it gets loaded at the Lundy Colliery, it needs to go get weighed. So how do I do that? It's basically, it's a 3 cycles. So I have the colliery, which is the mine. It receives an empty hopper. It ships something that needs to be weighed. And then I have the scale track where it receives a weighed car and it ships a loaded car. And then at Fenimore, which is one of my coal distributors on the layout, he receives a load and then he ships an empty. So then the cycle repeats itself over and over. Now, the one thing, I mentioned this book earlier, one thing I found in the book is that it had this quote that it says, at 4 miles per hour over a 46-foot scale, the rate is equal to, the scale operator can weigh a car about 6 cars per minute, and at 5 miles per hour, he can weigh about 8 cars per minute. So as many as 10 per minute have been weighed by a skilled weighman. So I'm thinking, okay, knowing that information, I decided to set up my scale operations to use a timer. And I thought, a nice compromise would be about 8 seconds. So when a car gets on my scale, it has to sit there for 8 seconds before you can move it off the scale. So how do I do that? I found this circuit a long time ago, and actually I wish I knew more about Arduinos, because I probably would have done it with an Arduino today. But what's different about it is that I have a switch here, a button, that is normally in the closed position. When you buy buttons, usually they're in the open position, but this is normally closed. So what happens is when you push the button, it starts a cycle. It starts the timer that's in here, and it's got an NE555 timer in here that you can adjust with this little screw on here by seconds. So I think it's, I forget what the range is, but I adjusted it so that it's down to 8 seconds. And what happens is when, the way I have this wired here, when I push that button, the red LED will go on. And then after 8 seconds, the green LED comes on and will stay on. It will stay on until I hit that red button again, and then the red light will come on. So how am I using that? So this is the panel that the operator sees. The left-hand side, these are 2 LEDs here, and this is the switch for the left-hand side points for the scale track. The next set is LEDs and a switch for the right-hand points for the scale track. And then these are 2 LEDs for the scale indicator lights. This is that red reset button that you saw on the circuit before. And then this is just a general on and off switch for the lights on the scale house and for the scale operations. So when you first look at the system, this switch is off, so these LEDs are going to be off. And when I turn it on, you can see that the green light comes on for the scale house, meaning it's ready for a car to come on. But the problem is I have green lights here for my points, which means that the points are aligned for the through track. So I align my points so that they are aligned for the scale track, so the red lights are on here, and the green light is on here for the scale, saying, hey, I'm ready for the next car. So once I move the car into position, I hit the red reset button, and the red light will come on, and it will stay on for 8 seconds. Then after 8 seconds, the green light will come on, and then I can move that car off the scale, and then move the next car onto the scale and hit the reset button again. So it's how I manage the operations for the scale. And it really does slow down your operations, and it does make it a little bit more fun. I think people who have operated it, they complain about it a little bit, but I think they also think it's a lot of fun. So I was asked this question a couple times, is what weighing methods are there? And there are several. One is that it's static. The car is completely stopped on the scale. And that's the way I operate mine. There are also weigh in motion scales where a cut of cars slowly rolls across the scale. Then modern scales are single track, and they will allow the engines to cross the scale, but they can never stop on the scale. And engines must never travel over the scale rails on gauntlet track scales like I have. I mean, that's why you have the through track, is for things that are very heavy to go on the through tracks. And, you know, when you think about it, an engineer can use an idler car over the through track to prevent the engine from getting on the scale when weighing the cars. I was also asked at one point, does the car need to be completely isolated on the scale, meaning nothing touching it? And that same book says, based on practical experience, proper care being exercised and correct weights can be determined on track scales by weighing cars coupled at both ends, coupled at one end, or uncoupled at both ends. So basically it doesn't matter. But I like to have my cars completely isolated. So let's take you through it. So we're going to use the through track for this operation. Okay. So I have kind of an overhead drawing as to so you can see what's going on. But basically I have two cars off here to the right. I have a car that has just finished being weighed here on the scale, and I have to weigh this car. Now remember, if I push this car onto the scale, I risk this engine coming onto the scale. So I have to do something about that. So the first thing I do is kind of push that car off the scale a bit and make some room here so that I can back off the scale track past the points and realign the points for the through track. When I built my scale track, the one thing I wish I had was made it longer between where the end of the pit is and where the points are, so that one car could sit fully in this area. But I can't do that. If I did that, then it would interfere with the points moving for me. So I had to push the car a little bit onto the scale. And then I back off past the points, and then come back and recouple to the car. Now the couplers are, they're not aligned, so it's a little bit tricky to connect them. And then I push the cars forward past the scale and then pull the one car that needs to be weighed back onto the scale. So then I weigh it, then I reconnect to all the cars, then I pull it back through the scale, and then I disconnect at this point, go back past the points, and then reconnect, and then I'm able to pull the cars through the scale now that they're all finished being weighed. So it makes it a little bit more complex maneuvers in terms of the engine. To make it a little bit simpler, I decided to build an idler car. And I built this for the Civil Engineer Achievement Program. So again, I have my two cars that have already been weighed off to the side. I have a car that's finished being weighed on the scale. I have one car that still needs to be weighed, my idler car, and the engine. So I'll push the car that was on the scale off the scale, and then I'll pull back the one car that needs to be weighed and disconnect. And then after it's done being weighed, I'll reconnect to all the cars, and then I'll just pull them through. So it makes the operation a lot more simple than if you didn't have the idler car. So really, scale tracks don't need to be operational. They can be just a more of a cosmetic thing on the layout, but it's nice to have it there because you know it's there. It can be a kit or a simple structure. Walters has a really nice kit that can be built in, I think, 2 different ways. It doesn't need to be a complex bay window type of structure that I have. And your scale test car could be a repurposed car. And it also, what I find is it adds a lot of fun for your operations. And these are the photographers that I use some of their photos from. And I'd like to open it up to Q&A.
Thanks, Chuck. I got a first question for you. Actually, I'll start with a comment before we get on the questions. If anybody's interested in doing the achievement program, this is something I thought about because the C&O has that scale car with the little doghouse in the middle that's self-propelled.
Yep.
That's actually motive power by the definition of the achievement program. So some of you may be sitting there going, there's no way in the world I can ever get the achievement program for motive power because I don't know how to scratch build a locomotive. That counts. That simple square-shaped doghouse thing counts. And there's a powered truck. You can buy powered trucks that would make it move.
Yeah, your Stanton drive, just like you did for your CSX engines, right? So
they make these little Stanton drives. Northwest Short Line, I think, is the people who make it. You could buy and make that thing powered and count towards your motive power, just so you know. So something to think about. The only reason I know that is because I was thinking about doing it myself, but I realized those cars are like 1984 built cars, so I didn't do it. CSX
well,
has it.
I don't know. The patent, when I was researching it, this patent said 1971.
Yeah, but the C&O ones were bought in 84, so I didn't buy them.
Oh,
okay. So that, put that to the side. But anyway, my question for you, Chuck, was the pit in some of those photos looks like right next to the rails are covered with like kind of like a little teepee of metal or something.
Yes.
So do you know what? Because they look like they have bolts all the way along the ground next to the rails. Are they like covers?
Yeah, I think they're. I really don't know what they are, but I think they're covers for the rail because the rail is actually has to move. It probably moves up and down a little bit, so it has a way to flex and also keep the weather from ending up in the pit. So I think they kind of protect what's below and allows also a little bit of flexibility so as the rails kind of move.
So I have to thank Chuck for his clinic too, because I actually I built a scale house a long time ago, and I really didn't understand scale tracks and what they did. So unfortunately, I already had just a piece of flex track going where the scale would have been. So I did what Chuck kind of referred to there, that he referenced at the end of the takeaway. I actually just put two little short pieces of track offset, like dummy track, so it kind of looks like it, but it's not operational. So you can kind of create that even simpler than Chuck's is amazing, but if you were thinking a way to do a scale track, maybe even easier, just put two short little pieces of rail offset from the regular rail, and it kind of looks like a scale track.
And I've seen online, the nice thing is you can search online, you'll find examples where somebody has modified a turnout, a commercial turnout to make a scale track too. To me, that seemed like a lot more work than just scratch building it. Because you were trying to overcome the challenges that a turnout gives you to make it do what you wanted it to do versus just scratch building it.
I think that would be harder, but that's just me.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else got any questions for Chuck? I don't know if anybody online even has anybody. Nope. All right, Chuck. Well, I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, no problem.
Coming all the way from New Jersey.
Yeah. Glad to be there.
So we're going to set up for our second clinic, and Chuck, you're more than welcome to stay on or drop off. It's up to you, but I appreciate you dialing in.
Yeah, I do have to drop off. I have another call I have to jump on in about 15 minutes. So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. See you, Chuck.
All right, bye.
All right, and we're doing our next one in here in person. We want to set up we're going to set up a screen, and we had a conversation about the screen. Bruce, you want to?
You want to set up the screen, or you want to use that?
So we'll just take a couple minutes here. We're going to set up for Bruce going to be giving us a clinic here What do you want to do?
He wants to use the screen.
Is it going to be?
This one.
You don't need it? How tall is it?
Oh, you want to put it up
I
there?
don't know.
How tall are you?
6'3"?
How tall am I? You want to put the screen on a table? Thanks. These people are height challenged.
There you go. Look at that. Yeah, probably.
Okay, so, one, thank you for at least recognizing the objections, but you couldn't even give me an offer. That's so why. You're at the bottom of the
Let's grab this one.
Where's this thing?
Oh, we got this one.
Something for the, Yes, I
Get a little closer.
You want to Good morning.
How you doing? Well, that's high.
Thank you for those articles that you write up regularly.
Oh, here we go.
I enjoyed this.
Good, sure.
You want that or you want my laptop?
It's probably easier for the, use that. Because then he would have to be the presenter.
See how that works.
And you gotta share your screen.
Yeah, I gotta get it.
So we can see what's going on.
Get it first here. What is it? In clinics? What are you doing?
Okay.
What folder is it in? What folder? Okay, it should be clinics.
Put my name on the list there. I'm not a member.
Okay.
Which one does it go?
I'm kind of on the fly
Should be
today,
2
but I
years.
grabbed some stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I get a lot of them.
Get my contact.
2 years, 2 weeks. That's the one. Okay. Back Valley. Right there? Oh, you know what I gotta do? I forgot to start sharing again. I gotta get Chuck. I need to. Oh, we gotta do this. Participants? Can I make a vision host? I need to be the presenter. What happened to, oh, wait.
Yeah, I heard from fire.
Okay, I'm presenting this. Let me see this. Make sure it's working. Oops. That's what they're seeing online.
You got the remote.
I just do it on the down arrow here. I'll push it whenever you want. How's that?
I'll talk if you push.
I could push.
Okay.
Okay, Don and Jim, can you still hear us online?
You shut off your microphone.
No, they should be able to hear me. Okay. I don't know if they're there. They may have taken a break too, so.
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right. Were you going to take care of the gentleman back there? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me move this little thing so we get this out of the way. Always having fun with technology here, let me tell you. Bruce, you ready? Kaylee, welcome. My predecessor in this job, if you don't remember Kaylee, I blame her for this every time I'm here. So, welcome. All right, Bruce, the floor is yours. I am your slide pusher. Just tell me when to push.
Okay, ready?
Ready.
Good morning, everybody. Right away, I'm going to tell you two things. Number one, I'm fully neutralized. Fully. I meet all the requirements of CDC for the state of New Hampshire. No, I don't live in Connecticut. I live in New Hampshire. And the other announcement was near and dear to my heart. Our first operating session is May 14th. First time in 16 months. Welcome to the new normal. The other thing is, I wear hearing aids, so acoustics are a problem to me. So if you need a question or whatnot, I don't hear most of what you'll say. So I'm going to plead with you, scream at me. And I'm sorry, Kaylee, you're a young female with a high-pitched voice, and guess what frequencies I don't hear anymore. All right. I answered the call. We're all volunteers. We all enjoy getting together. You saw your announcement from Ron about, I need another clinic. And I thought about it, and I said, I can do that. I'm getting restless. It's been 14 months since I did the last one. Okay, I'll do one. So knowing that you don't know me, and I have one or two, I should say two, acquaintances that are in this room, here and here. This guy's operated with us, so he's familiar with Lamar as well. So the rest of you don't know. So knowing this, I said, well, I'll give you a little bit of background information about me, and you can verify it with either Jim or Kaylee. That was not meant for publication. So all that BS you saw about me, I'll deny every bit of it. Yes, I have 52 years in MRA. Been through some of the management cycle, if you were, and directors and division presidents and all that stuff. But most importantly, I think the part that I like the best about our hobby is I was a coordinator for our monthly fun night program, which runs 10 months a year for 6 years. Jeff just called it the file that's
thumb drive, he put in his computer, he says, there's a lot of clinics here. I go, yeah, there's 60 of them right there. So, unaccustomed as I am of doing this public speaking thing, we're going to get this road on the show. 2 weeks, 2 years, building the Stratton Valley Gym Falls. This is something I took on that is totally outside my box. I have spent 33 years building my own model railroad. The idea of building somebody else's was not attractive. Because we're in the same division, Jim contacted me and he said, I have a dream. I would really, really like to have this model railroad in my home. Can you do it for me? At first, it was total rejection on my part. I go, I'm already building one. Why should I tackle building another one? That's like insanity. We got together. We spent a couple hours in this empty room in his home. And we clicked. I could see the man's dream. And it kind of drew me in, I think, personally. He showed me a file, and you'll see it here in a minute, that he had John Armstrong do up a truck plant for him as well. So I thought, this guy is really serious. And the more I talked, the more I could see that his dream was to the fore, but also was pretty well developed. So at the end of the first meeting with him, we kind of hit it off. And I accepted the commission, if you were, to build this model railroad with him. It took us 2 years and 2 weeks. And it was on Tour de Chooch, that year. That's now 2 years ago. So, here's my button pusher.
I'm multitasking, trying to get the lights better so it's easier to see.
I have my own clicker. I can stand off to the side. This is the road, by the way. That's Jim Falls. What you saw in the write-up about you guys being the first to see this, I didn't realize. I gave this in the NERX virtual convention back in December or January, where it was. I forgot about it. He is going to be at the Westford Convention. So if I give this clinic there, it's on the schedule. The man whose dream we're going to talk about is going to be there to answer your questions and get a dialogue going. He's quite a guy. Building a dream. How Jim Falls approached achieving his dream layout. The full name is the Stratton Valley Railroad and Transfer Company. He has a very strong interest in truck and car models, and you will see gazillions of these things on this model. This is what Jim wrote. And you put that screen so far away and need a pair of binoculars to read it.
I'll have you know, you put that on the table? I just wanted to know.
I didn't touch it. This is a story that he came up with. As a youngster and a New Hampshire boy who loved playing cars and trucks out in my backyard. In fact, I was so enthralled with the play that I even built concrete roadways by cars and trucks. Then, one Christmas Eve when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my parents let me open one of my presents. Naturally, I chose the biggest package. It was my very first train set, a Lionel 027, with a few cars and oval track that would circle the Christmas tree. Does this sound familiar to all of us? One thing led to another. And as I grew older, the time that was available for cars, trucks, and trains became impossible to obtain. Nonetheless, I kept going to a local hobby shop and dreamed about building my own railroad, complete with cars and trucks. Finally, beyond middle age, I began to find time to Scott Buildings and Exoscale Buildings, along with assorted cheap Scott and Rio Grande vehicles. I had no real plan for these, but just really enjoyed working with my hands in the evening, building what one day I hoped would be a railroad layout. One day it dawned on me that with all of these buildings and vehicles, I really did not have a realistic track plan for a railroad that would accommodate them. I bought all the regular track planning books that I could from the hobby shop, but somehow none of these plans really fit what I wanted. And more importantly, none of my plans really fit my business case. During one particular frustrating week in 2003, with no plan in sight, I sat down and wrote a letter to John Armstrong. he has the original. To see a piece of paper that had John penciled in his hand on the paper that you got in your hands is really awe-inspiring. He asked him if he would design a lot of railroad for me that would fit my needs and my space. Much to my surprise, like John Armstrong agreed to design a railroad for me. All the railroad track planning with John was done either by letter, with long lists of wants and desires, or discussions as part of telephone conversations. For those of you who may not know, John Armstrong is one of the most prolific model railroad designers. He was published in nearly all the model railroad magazines. Complete model railroad layout books were offered with his designs. He was probably most famous for his railroad yard designs and his collaboration with other designers of the day. To say the least, it was a thrill to work with John, and I learned a lot about railroad planning. To this day, I love his original layout design, framed on a wall in my training room. This original track plan was completed in 2003. Sadly, John passed away in 2004. My layout was one of the last ones he did. These are just a few of the things I learned from John while he was planning his original layout. The railroad had to have a purpose. The railroad had to have some kind of revenue. It had to have rolling stock that supported the revenue plan. It had to have a name. It had to have a time in history. It had to have geographic place. It had to have a prototype for my own railroad. I had to decide on a scale. I had to have planned motive power that fit the time frame. I had to have all the same couplers. I had to have acceptable grades. There are certainly other considerations, but by focusing on these, I got some real definition of what the railroad was going to do and how it was going to do it. Once the plan was finished, I attacked the basement and installed new wallboard, baseboard heat, new electrical outlets, complete with dimmers for all railroad and lines and that I was going to have. Things were going just great. Pause. Does this sound familiar? Have we all been here? Next slide, please. What does that say, guys?
Time to move.
And girl, I'm sorry, kid. All of a sudden, my dear wife came to me and said she would like to move. Remember, we're in the dream of building your model railroad. And wife says, we're going to move. Basement construction of the railroad came to a screeching halt, and we began spending many, many weekends looking at houses. After about 6 frustrating months, we found a house that we really liked, situated on a lake in New Hampshire, and believe it or not, it was only 5 minutes from our old house. You have to appreciate it. Here's this barrier. Right? I can say this because you're all from Connecticut. There's a barrier that runs north and south across the United States. It's impenetrable. This is how a Massachusetts mindset works. Right? New Hampshire is considered a foreign country. He lives in Methuen, Mass, which is the south side of the border. He moved to Salem, New Hampshire, the other side of the border. Yes, I enjoy bashing Massachusetts residents, yes. One of the things I did, even before we moved into the new house, was measure the new basement. You guessed it, the John Armstrong layout would not fit in the space. What to do now? Well, for the first year or so in the new house, a lot of time was taken up doing new house things, like remodeling. Finally, we were both satisfied with our new home, and it was time to visit the railroad project again. My wife knew how important this railroad was to me, and she graciously gave up an entire playroom, 14 feet by 20 feet, on the first floor of the layout. Talk about setting up a showcase. This home, you come off the driveway, you walk into the front door, which is underneath the portfolio. You open the doors and you're in a reception area. To the right is a set of stairs that brings you up to the living area. The immediate to the left is an arch, no doors. Guess where the 14 by 20 foot space is? The other side of that arch. So if you're a modeler, you come to visit Jim, it's like come into my palace. It's right there. Talk about handicapped accessible. Nice space. And by the way, full set of French doors overlooking the water on the other side. I tried to use at least some of the John Armstrong features in the new layout with some success. Following his guidelines, I decided what the purpose of the railroad was to be, where it would be located, and how it was going to make money over the long term. I decided that the railroad was going to be fictional and located in Vermont and an HO scale. I sent away for several geodetic maps of southern Vermont and laid out an imaginary track plan on these maps. Now I was able to identify the towns that the railroad would pass through and some of the terrain it would encounter. The Stratton Valley Railroad and Transfer Company towns are Stratton Mountain. These are mileposts that he was at first using to get businesses involved. Wardsboro, Townsend, Saxons River, and Bellows Falls. So he had envisioned a short line railroad in the southwest corner of Vermont that's about 35 miles long. The Stratton Valley is set in the late 1940s. The major source of revenue was hauling large granite blocks from the granite mine at Stratton. Down to the Connecticut River in Bellows Falls, where the granite is shipped to New York City on barges for use in constructing large buildings in the sea. As a result of the grades on the Stratton Valley and the weight of the granite blocks, trains are pretty much limited to 2 or 3 cars. Other consists are able to handle 4 or 5 cars. Some of the locomotives are coal-fired 260 Alphas and are equipped with an NCE and their DCC and sound equipment. Rolling stock, real mix of new and used equipment, as the Stratton Valley required various rolling stock from other railroads. Primary rolling stock includes a number of 40-foot flat cars to move the granite loads from the quarry to the dock on the Connecticut River. Short hoppers are used to move large gold nuggets. It is the first time you'll see his sense of humor stay on that gold number spot as we go through the presentation. For distribution center near the engine house, a few 40-foot lumber cars are used to transport cut lumber to various construction sites. More 40-foot flat cars used to bring generator sets and new electric motors to other parts of the Stratton Valley. Another source of revenue are the weekend passenger excursions to the it's Bears, not Barry, Junction Nudist Camp, where during the warm months, swimming, fishing, and sunbathing are enjoyed. Refreshments are available at the concession stands. Hot dogs, lobster roll, beer, and pickled limes are all favorites. Suntan lotion and binocular sales bring in a fair amount of revenue as well. Towns along the Stratton Valley just coming alive as such lots of building construction and road building equipment can be seen. As a bonus, during the building of the Stratton Valley, a huge gold mine was discovered, and as just now, finding markets for oversized nuggets. An electronic chip mine is a second industry with its humor. Chip mine was also discovered in the foothills, and the Motorola company just purchased the mine output for something they are developing called television. Fishing in parts of the Connecticut River here resulted in some unusual game fishing in this area. Lobster and some great white sharks have been known to be caught, all adding to the influx of tourists and sportsmen. There is still some carryover of older established enterprises, including a rumored moonshine still in operation in one of the foothills. The Stratton Valley has finally become a reality, and one of my most important personal goals has been realized. Thanks to my wife and many others, including yours truly, a longtime supporter of this hobby. The Stratton Valley will be open for the Tour de Chooch in the coming years. He did Tour de Chooch once. The second year, which was now 2 years ago, I got a call from his wife, and he said he's in intensive care. He spent about 14 days in intensive care instead of going Tour de Chooch. You all know what Tour de Chooch is, right? I see one. Yes, thanks, Jim. That's my support function right there.
Hey, what am I, child liver?
Have you been on a tour?
What's that? What?
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, Twitter Truth was set up in 1994. It started with, I think, 8 layouts, and all it was open your doors. If you want to go, come. If you don't want to go, stay home. It's as simple as that. Over the years, and we're now into 27 years, it has grown to be a 2-day event. And it's the same thing. Go to a trade show, pick up a yellow flyer, and it lists all the addresses. That's all there is. Get up in the morning, and Dad, we know what you do. We're not responsible for the drive-up windows, because I know that's what you're going to do. You get up in the morning, you get in the car, and it's 100 miles an hour to the first layout, and then the second layout, and the third layout, and poor wife is sitting there with her legs crossed because you're not stopping. You're doing drive-up windows. We know this. I make $75 or 75 cents every total choose because I put a sign at the bottom of the stairs that says bathroom upstairs to the right, leave a quarter on the seat. So, Twitter Chooch was been going for, like I said, this will be year 27, and it's just you open the doors. That's all. That's all. You don't buy anything. There's no tickets. There's no rules. You just go visit. Okay.
Great way to see layout and a great way to get inspiration. So, are we doing it this year?
Yeah, Twitter Chooch is always a Thanksgiving weekend. It's Saturday and Sunday of Thanksgiving. And the territory it covers is coming closer to you all the time. It starts up in Rockingham County in New Hampshire, just south of Portsmouth. And it makes a big sweep all the way down into eastern Massachusetts, all the way out to Gardner and Worcester. And Swansea. If you're going to do another layout, as long as you live, you have to do Odai in Swansea. This is O scale. These are an MMR, right? And just wear a bib. That's all I can tell you. You're going to wipe your chin off every time you turn a corner in this layout. It's gorgeous. And it's set up for operations. We operated on there one weekend. It operates like a Swiss watch. It's beautiful. The scenery goes from knee-high all the way to the ceiling. Can't say enough. It's been published in magazines and all of that. Yada, yada. So I figured another 5 years it ought to be down to Hartford by now, starting in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And every year it changes. Every year new guys will come on. Others will take a year off. This kind of thing. So it's fresh each time you go. All right. Here's where we're at. We have the dream. We have the space. We have the track plan. Now, let's get building. I think stock of what we have on the first day. This is a scope of work we put together so that we had a path. Right, we had benchmarks, if you were, so that we could have materials available when you needed them, for example. So this is the framework that we used to build this thing out. The purpose of the proposal was to install track and turnouts with ground throws and the supporting NCDCC system for the live and operational iso-scale model railroad. The proposal does not include any scenery except ballast of a track or structure work. The project is broken down into 5 phases. And this is where we started. As we go along, you're going to see that we deviated. Phase 1, design, build, and install all the NCE equipment, including the power supply, command center, electronic circuit breakers, track power bus installation, cab bus installation, UTP plugins, radio antennas, programming track, rack to hold the command station, electronic circuit breakers, and power supply. The track feeders will be included in the track installation work. Phase 2, install a loop main line at railroad and roadbed. Flex track turnouts, heading to industrial and yard areas, track feeders and ballast. Track to be spray painted and cleaned. Track work tested for operation. I'll diverge right here. Jim asked me to build this on a railroad. Guess what skill I don't have is using flex track. I had to learn how to use commercial turnouts and flex track, because I hand laid everything on my own. So this was a learning curve for me, and you can see how that he and I would melt as we go on. So this is what I'm learning from him as he's learning from what I'm doing. Track work in the yard area with road bed, flex track turnouts, ground throws, track fuse ballast, track straight bend. Phase 4, track work in the industrial area, track 5, track work in the quarry area, and then in general, all materials we purchased and provided by Jim Falls, installed by me and Jim. Type and quantity materials have been identified and procured as the project moves along. And we were successful in doing this. A lot of times we would just sit down and say, we're here, and according to that, we're supposed to be there, right? Are we still there? And we'd have that dialogue, and he would be comfortable where we were going. Materials would be ordered, so that next week everything was ready to go, and we just keep on going. Slide, please. This is what we started with. This is space available to build a Trenton Valley. First day of the rest of your modeling experience. And up there, that is Elvira. She was our constant companion. And the first day I showed up with my toolbox, if you notice there's a white sign she's holding in her hand. It says, coffee time. Don't forget coffee time. And that became a ritual with us. Every day, we would 10 to 2. At 12 o'clock, we stop. And we'd go upstairs, have a cup of coffee, shoot the breeze, come back downstairs and resume. So Elvira was our guide for coffee. The first construction project we built was a power supply system. This was built off-site and installed as a completed component of the build-out. This enabled track testing as track was laid. So early in the project, trains were running. As I'm sure you know, if you want to keep interest in a hobby and you want to keep the momentum going, put down that first piece of flex track and put wires on it. So take your favorite locomotive, go back and forth on 3 feet of track. And what it does, it gets the juices flowing. So you want to come back tomorrow and put the second piece of track in. And this is the philosophy we used here. Slide, please. All right, that's the DCC stuff. As you can see here, there's a NC command station. What I did is, I put in a double duplex receptor at 120 volt level, trying to get this and to understand the concept of turning this layout on and off was a real challenge. I said, you don't come in my basement and you walk up to the fascia and there's a switch on the fascia board, it's a door. So we're going to run trains, close the switch. We're done for the night, close the switch. To get that simple thought into this man's head, it was like beating on concrete. So I almost got there. I'll admit, almost got there, but there was still some remote stuff that he kept plugging extension cords in, and I keep ticking away. This is the other one I couldn't shake. That is right out of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, great, and Boris Karloff with the big night switch. It's essentially a double pole switch for his programming track. But remember, I'm working for him. What the customer wants, the customer gets. As things changed as the project started and moved along, that's not your eyeballs. That is a mirror image. This is an Ian Rice track plan that was published in Motorota magazine. He liked the concept, but it was going in the wrong direction for his space. So he put it on a copy machine and did a reverse copy of it. And yeah, it's hard. It's real to understand that he's taken this thing and done a mirror image to it. And these are some of the funny statistics on the side. You see the oval, which goes around the perimeter. That was in the first phase of construction. And again, it goes back to that. You want to keep your interest up, get trains running as soon as you can. So the oval is 63 inches wide, 153 inches long. Then there's a short L section he talks about. There's a long shelf for quarry. These are his thoughts. How much, another 14 for this DCC main bus was going to be, how many jacks he needed for his plug-ins, which is ironic because he uses radial throttles. This is going to be a wonderful project inside the gym. You notice that right here, keep this in mind for a minute, not shown in here is what we call the quarry branch. This is how this dream evolved as we started into the construction phase. Slide please. Was this the layout that was actually built? No. A modeler cannot follow the plan. It is in the DNA to see something, question its purpose, and then change it into a better idea. This is a real quick sketch I did. This is what really it came out looking like. So if you remember that slide with the mirror image thing, the only thing we really kept in concept was the outside oval. Everything after that got modified. So this part right here in the center where the oval is located is what we call the peninsula. And then he took off on the upper right-hand corner up there into what we call the quarry branch. So this was drawn after all the construction was done, so I could illustrate the difference between this is what we started with and this is what we ended up with. Which is, again, for me working with him was a real challenge. I'm just the opposite. I drew my track plans and I drew a benchwork plan before there was ever a stick of lumber in that basement. I knew from day one what the final railroad was going to look like. So to do this and change things as you go along is totally contrary to how I think. So again, I'm learning from this experience with Jim. Let's get to the construction phase. Here we go. Peninsula benchwork is on the right. That's all it is. And the benchwork for the branch is over here. And if you notice there was a clutter, is the only way to describe it. Jim had attempted to lay out a track layout for this quarry branch over here. And the civil engineers that laid out New York Central's terminal in Manhattan, they would have been proud of him. There was no space left for the plywood underneath. And one of the first discussions we had is we really need to streamline this. Take out all these double crossovers and diamonds, and you're going to have a maintenance nightmare. Slide, please. The peninsula got track and ballast first. That was in phase one of our document that kind of guide us on how to build. Slide. Laying track and ballasting were the first phase of the construction of the peninsula. One of the criteria that I had to deal with Jim was he bought into Woodland Scenics on a huge scale. If it didn't say Woodland Scenics on the package, it wasn't put on the warehouse, which was kind of interesting to see. I don't use those materials, and he really thought Woodland Scenics was, the best thing since sliced bread. What came out of that was this surface right here was a piece of 4-inch foam. We use solid foam for construction all the time. Unfortunately for him, is he bought this piece of foam which is used for concrete insulation on a foundation. It has foil on one side and plastic on the other. And the other part of it is grippers. It's not flat. We go to the home center and we buy 2-inch, 1-inch, 1.5, 2-inch expanded foam, and it's just dead flat. It's a big. It makes it really good to work with the modelers. But this became a real serious problem. I could not convince him to get rid of that. I tried over and over. The foundation is going to be the trouble. On top of that is one of the Scenics road bed. This is foam put down with their adhesive, which is really nice to work with. His whole concept was using flux track, which is again glue. So you got foam, glue, road bed, glue, track. Nice assembly until you factor in this. all right? You can't fix any kinks and rails or anything like that. You can't move them around. You can't spike anything. There's zero structure underneath them. So it became a real problem as construction began. Slide, please. Main line is down. One of the changes in the original track plan was to delete the turntable and substitute a 3-track yard. I did a clinic once at Hub Division's Fun Night, and one of the fellows stood up and said, "I don't operate." And I looked at this as this is fun to play with. And I stood in the middle of the group and I go, "And damn it, I'm an operator." Everybody chuckled and laughed, and this is where my influence came out. That 3-track yard, I saw this truck plan, and I said, you know, this would be fun to operate on. I could create a traffic pattern here, but you need basic infrastructure. This little 3-track yard became the terminal. So you now have a basis for an out and back traffic pattern, and he's not there yet. I haven't worked on him. I figure I got another 2 years. But hopefully I'll get a couple of waybills into his hands so that the play value will rise up. So this is what some of those modifications were coming from that we saw in the original track plan that we kept kind of manipulating. Fine scale miniatures engine house with an original John Allen design. I would ask him, what's going to go here? He said, oh, I got a building. You disappeared on the other part of the basement. And you come up with like 3 more buildings. Multiply that times almost 2 years. That's a lot of buildings. He would just, oh, I've got something downstairs. He would go down and up and up. And I got to fit these things in. And it was like, holy mackerel, this is like Christmas time. Decorating a tree. Building after building after building. Slide, please. Jim had been building structures for years. This one is the chip mine. As the build-up progressed, a home had to be found for a lot of pre-built structures. Slide. There are a lot of pre-built structures that were incorporated into the final layout. And when he was building these, he was building on a workbench down in his basement, but they were all on bases of some kind. And now you've got to put them into a finished on a railroad that's at 4 inches of foam. So the bases became a problem. So these models spent a lot of time soaking. Dumpsters in a sink to loosen the white glue. So we pull the buildings off of the bases and then plant them permanently on the layout. Slide, please. Benchwork in the beginning is located at track the quarry branch. This was a clean slate. Once he actually told me, he said, the track plans here are horrible. And his soldering skills, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 the best you could do and 10 be the worst you could do with big globs of solder, he was about a 15. melted ties, right? Probably around number 16 or 18 wire soldered to the inside of the rails with a big glob of solder. It was horrible. And binders and number 4 turnouts everywhere. So he finally said one day, I'm going to throw it all away. Yes! Now we got a clean piece of plywood. Now sit down with a brown paper and a pencil, and we're going to start sketching out, and we're going to come up with a better idea. And after conversations, we came up with this quarry branch concept. Here's an example of all the wooden scenic materials that he was really allowed to. Once the peninsula track goes down, construction moved on and quarry branch. Wooden scenic extract these products and roads for the various elevations and roadway. Quarry branch actually turns out to be 2 branches in the same place, a lower level and an upper. And what that did for him was it created more opportunities for industries. So his play value was keep going up as we simplified his original plan and created a lower quarry branch and an upper quarry branch. Plus, keep going down to the basement, coming up with another bridge. So by elevating track, we managed to get some of the bridges in. Slide, please. The quarry branch construction moves along towards terminal points. The photo backdrop was installed prior to the construction. Later, the foreground seating was installed with matching and blending of the colors. One of the things that happened, he purchased this from a guy down on the street, if I remember right. The scenery is beautiful. This is one of those things where read the directions that the manufacturer suggests. It actually said not to adhere at all. He prefers to hang the photo backdrops. This thing is 18 feet long, I think. He prefers to have them hung from the top edge so they hang naturally and they don't rip them. Well, Jim decided to put a wallpaper paste. We didn't take into consideration that the photo backdrops had a coating on them. So if you put water-based adhesive on the back and you stick them on the wall, as the adhesive dries, it has to go someplace. The moisture in it has to go someplace. And having a coating on the outside has no place to go. So the bubbles, there were bubbles the size of basketballs all over this thing. And you can't slip them and push them back in because now the adhesive is void on the backside. So it was a huge problem. Ultimately, he took it out. He called up the fellow from the Cape, and he actually came up from the Cape and hung it for Jim. So this is the second one. This is the before concept of car branch. A lot of discussion ensued before the final concept was built. And well, you can see some of the wires, it was a disaster. There's only way this guy, it had to go. So, major change in Jim's original design concept that redefined the purpose of the trains operating on the branch. There are now two branches, upper and lower. This allows for more interest, better defined scenes, and two endpoints for trains to operate to. Remember, I put a 3-track yard down on the main peninsula as a terminal. So you now have a supply of freight cars you could distribute to this place. And then they would have another alternative. In other words, the pattern of the yard, quarry, unloading a barge, empties back to the yard, and continue that cycle like any 3-cycle, 4-cycle waygo will let you do. Jim had 3 pre-built bridges that would fit in a track arrangement. The need to fit the bridges in the scene drove the location and direction of the water courses. We ended up with 1 lake, 2 rivers, and a pond. So these are some of the bridges. There's one you see later, here. Fourth bridge was built off-site and installed on the lower branch. This double span was cast a hydrocal with granite blocks carved in and stained. This is what you call repurposing. I just wanted to do it, is build a granite arch bridge, patterned off the one that's in Rockport, Massachusetts. And I built a mold, I cast the parts. I only had one arch, that's all I needed. And where I actually installed it is at a place on my rock on a railroad that has no need for a bridge. So how do you camouflage an installation of a bridge with no need? It's simple. You put a sign on both ends that bridge closed. Okay? So we dubbed it Railfans Bridge because a mainline truck branch that I use passes underneath it, and Walters, Movement CX70 makes little figures of cameras. You know, rail fans hanging on the bridge with the cameras. So there's a little bit of interest and humor. So I had the molds. So when this came up, I said, oh, okay, I'll just build 2 more. And it's on a curve. It's a very soft curve in here. So I cast 2 bridges, allotments, made a piece in the middle, all cast. It's all hydrocal, carved and stained. And I did that at home. Right? I'm a firm believer of brown paper and a pencil, a magic marker, and an onion skin. Onion skin is a tracing paper used by architects, and you can see through it. So they're handy tools and they're cheap. They don't cost anything. And this is how the bridge was built. The track was put in, the woodland scenics, grade, bungee boards, things were all in, and I just put a piece of tracing paper on it and traced the track and brought it home. Built the 2 bridges, brought it home to Jim's. Out, bridge, in, track across. This is ballasted deck, so I didn't have to worry about, you know, things like trussels. But that was the 4th bridge in the 21st. Here we're starting to take some shape. I like structure-like plastic. This was applied to plastic cloth scenery based on a lot of rock castings. After all, this is Vermont. Masonite fascia has been installed prior to adding the scenery place. And one of the things that Jim decided on was he painted the fascia back like a Pullman green color. And then on one of our conversations, I said, you know, it'd be really nice to set it off a little bit with grass washers. And so it gives it an industrial look with the green back and the grass fastenings like rivet heads. And in this space, it came out very effective. It looked really, really nice. Location of watercourse is defined by the placement of the bridges. Mother Nature has nothing on model railroaders, let me tell you. We put the bridge in first, and then we try to figure out where the water went. Second water feature is now taking shape. The river bends away behind the senior U-block, and the lake starts to take shape behind the causeway. The sluice gate will pull back the water so the swimmers will have a place to swim. And that's way up there. There's a sluice gate. There's a river. It curves around underneath that truss bridge. The swimming lake has been filled with water, and the river has begun its course toward the Hudson River. And this is the nudist colony, if you were, where the sale of binoculars pays for the coach seats on the railroad. There's the sluice gate. And obviously that's the truss bridge. When you get to this stage here, when the coloration is starting to come in, it's like a pause moment. Okay? This is what model railroading is all about. Look what I can create. Look what I have a dream, and now it's coming to fruition. So this was a real nice time for him. On the course of construction, new ideas popped up. New dimmers for track lights. He put these track lights on this wall, on this side. There's another set of track lights down the middle of the peninsula. And I said, you've got a wall switch for the boom. You come in through arch. That's the track light down the middle. You got these lines over here. If it was me, I'd figure out a way real quick, pull those two together. So you have one control point for all the lighting. And again, that's not how he thinks. He thinks in small pieces. I think in big chunks. So the compromise was, we put a dimmer here in the fascia that would control these track lights down the side. So I got what I wanted, I guess, and Jim got what he wanted. Construction moving right along. Quarry is complete. Work has progressed now on the scenery in the peninsula. So we've moved out the quarry branch in the background. This is the peninsula. So this is the next water feature. We're in here now. That makes 4. Track it down. Senior is well along its way to completion, and the trains are running. Let's take a quick tour of the Trenton Valley Railroad and Transportation Company. The elevated roadway acts as a view block. Again, this is two guys standing in the space having a conversation. You know, what do you think? What happens if we do this? What happens? And this is the result. We put this view block right down the center. This is a cemetery. That was built on a base in the basement many years earlier. He wanted to have it in his layout. So, okay. And remember, he has a very serious interest in trucks and vehicles. So we had to maximize the amount of space on the model railroad to handle all the figures, all the vehicles. So having this road go from the cemetery right down the center, it divided the railroad into this town scene and this town scene. And remember, my primary interest in the hobby is operating. So what we just created was destinations. So we go from town A to town B, we go from town B to the Quarry Branch, we go from the Quarry Branch back to town A. So when you go around the room, you know that's typical. You only see one scene at a time, and this is how we accomplish that. Highway bridge access crosses over the main yard. This one is the pipe stuff. I forget how many, 6 or 2 or 3, all spliced together. And this is where a modest license comes in. There's not a structural engineer in the world that would guarantee that that bridge would stay up there. But remember, what's underneath it is this forest home. It has no structural strength. I mean, you push your thumb to it. So to put in bridge abutments and piles and things like that was a nightmare. So if you look close, you can see the beam here, and the beam there, and the beam there. That was 2 attempts to do that. And how you put them in place, you just push them into that point. And then you pull them back up until you get that elevation you need. Harbor is used to transload quarried stone. This is the last feature for the water right here. And again, Jim's sense of humor comes forward. I don't know where he got these rocks from, but he had insisted that he wanted to put those rocks there. And then he put a little bridge, a wooden bridge, and a manual fishing pole. This is right at the door. This is the first thing you see when you come into the room. Quarry Branch, upper on the left, lower on the right. Again, another road down the center for his trucks. Sorry. Quarry Branch, 3 rail bridges, 1 road. Here's a tip. Everybody feed birds? You feed the birds at home? I do. I buy them in 25-pound bags. Out of that 25-pound bag, there's probably 2 pounds of twigs in there. I fish them all out. It's like clogging a feeder. That makes the best deadfall for modeling forests and things you've ever imagined. If you look close, you can see some of it here. That's where it came from, was out of birdseed. Slide, please. This is the roadway that passes underneath the truss bridge. There's a fisherman and the water feature. And again, the Woodland Scenics, that's their, what they call it, water wonder, I forget what they call it. It's a 2-part epoxy. It doesn't smell. You know, the old Envirotex, we had to vent the space for 4 months before you get back there. And it's totally odorless, and it sets up in about 24 hours. It's really a major step forward in our toolbox to make it seem. Here we go. We're heading down to the swimming beach. This is the 4th water feature on Stratton Valley. Looks like the shark fishing is good. And if you look close, there's a great white shark hanging up there. There he is, right there. That's his skills. When's the last time you saw a great white shark in the Connecticut River? Slide. They had 2 trophies. Kelly, just turn around for a minute, put your fingers in your ears. This young lady is all natural well. So there's 2 trophies there, the shark and the young lady. And don't you dare accuse me of being slide. Okay, this is a beach. When we finished my part of the construction, we left this because we really didn't have a good plan yet for what he wanted to do with the beach area. Since he has added a whole bunch of detail stuff to that area. Another building that came up from the basement that he really insisted that be included, so we managed to get that blended in. This is the rock work, this is huge. That's great stuff to work with, except for one problem, is if you cut it off the sheet, all the texture's 2-dimensional. So when you cut it, you end up with a top surface that's as smooth as a baby's arch. So some of it I actually cut bridges in it to match the stones underneath it. but it doesn't color the same because the material is different from the inside and from the outside. Dry Valley is also a transfer company. I don't know how many vehicles are on that layout. Right, to say 100, I'm sure I'd be short about 100. There are zillions of these things. It's like the dream has become a reality. Isn't that what this hobby is all about? It took 2 years, 2 weeks to build Jim Fall's dream layout. And I tell you, he's one happy guy. That's the last one. That's it. And my connection to him, for some reason, will not go away. I have, sitting on my layout on the main line in my town of Franklin, a brass shay. This shay has been around the United States at least twice. I know it went to Idaho once for custom painting and come back. And if you ever dealt with early brass models, you're finicky. I used to do a boatload of custom painting. And when you take a brass model apart, because they're all handcrafted, they're still two alike. I don't remember years ago, PFM was one, and I'm not sure who the other company was, and we put a lot of Boston and Maine V15 mobiles. I did 3 of them for different customers. The first one back together, fine. The second one, not so fine. The third one, 2 weeks later, I'm still pulling my hair out trying to get this thing to run. And this is classic of this shed, the same thing. It's a 3-trucker. So the third truck is a female coupling and a male coupling. And as the thing goes around the corners, they move back and forth. Well, the first 2 trucks are that long. So then they go back and forth, they stay in the hole. The third one on the tender is short. So when the tender moves, it falls out. So the custom painter used a piece of heat shrink tubing to try to keep this thing in and then deliver it. Well, guess what? It don't work. So I soldered on a male end. I soldered on a female end. And I got it all back together again. I think I'm done, and I'll be if that thing didn't create a short circuit, and I can't find it. This has been 3 weeks. Welcome to the world of brass. All right, my chatting is done.
Excellent.
I want to thank you guys for my clinic. The ability and my opportunity to come here to entertain you for tonight. And we all see you in October, right? I don't want to see this. I will see each and every one of you during the clinic, operating session, layout floor, banquet, you name it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, I think we have one thing left for you, and that's Don. You on, Don?
Oh.
So, it's your turn now?
Yeah, I lost the video.
Hey, Don. There you go. Don uploaded his presentation to YouTube so you can pull it up. So. Oh, this is the files?
Great. Great.
I think he's still troubleshooting. Don, we can hear your voice, we just can't hear the screen. Don, can you hear us? Don. Don, I can hear you coughing, but I can't. Do you hear us?
Playing it last night.
Don, can you hear us? He's on here twice too, so I don't know if it was him. It looks like a really cool live stream layout. If that means anything to you.
Where are you from? So, yeah, I'm very familiar.
That's Ron. That's Ron dialing in.
You're on.
So let him know we can hear the whole phone. He can hear you. Go ahead. He tried to pick up the phone.
Oh, I thought I called your number.
No, you called Don through the thing. Call him again. Oh my gosh. Good thing we don't run a technology company.
So you want me to talk from through there? She's talking through the telephone.
Hello?
Hey, Don.
Yeah.
We cannot hear the presentation.
I'm sorry. I lost the video. I went to check where this was and it went away.
Video's playing.
Yeah, but I mean, I couldn't see the regular screen. Can you hear me over the thing when I talk?
Yes.
'Cause, see, I've muted the sound here because I was hearing it coming back. I guess, I'm not sure how this works. I guess maybe I have to unmute here and just drop my volume way down.
Give it a try.
All right, can you hear me at all now? Yeah, sounds like it. All right, let's see if you can hear the video. Is that coming through?
No.
Well, what's going on? Oh, well, I just saw it up there. What? There it is. There it is. Ah. This is my... We're going to have a terrible echo.
In preparation for bringing
I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay. This is a car shop. They're bringing the cars out for the morning run. I'm hearing about 3 echoes myself here. I don't know how to prevent it unless I unplug my speakers or turn. Let's see. All right. I hope you can still hear it. I think they can hear me, but if I have it on, I get an echo. The loco's in the back of the car shop. You're looking now at the boiler shop across the big turntable from the main line and the locomotive shop. And there's the 5-stall roundhouse. This was the year the Preservation Society started operating the railroad after it had been shut down for, I think, more than 10 years, and so there's peeling paint everywhere. It's a parts rack on the left side. There's a press and shaper on the view that just disappeared on that side. This is on the north side, closest to the road. The other was closer to the main line. This is where they printed their own brochures and things. This was Norman Sandley's office.
Here you see a track, here you see it on, here you see it on. Hello?
Hey, Don, we don't hear you.
Oh, no.
Well, you haven't been saying anything.
I've turned the volume down on my speakers. There's sound playing. Well, I don't know how to look at this. guess I have to unplug my speakers. Turning them down kills it unless you're hearing it through the speakers instead of from the. Okay, well, maybe I just have to talk. Here they're backing up. The roundhouse is behind the car shop and turntable in there where the engine was fired up. So now they're backing the engine up down the main. At the time this was taken, there was just a coal pile. I had to shovel it in. Member built a small coaling tower that now sits there so they can just load it earlier, you know, up power loading ramp, and then just open the gate and it runs into the tender. The tender holds 200 pounds of coal and 100 gallons of water, and they add water a couple times during the day depending on number of runs and how heavy the trains are. There's the engine's backing down out of the service and you know, work area down to the water tank and beyond it to the station where the passengers will board. Norman Sandley, who built this, and his father Elmer liked the small trains in England and were inspired by it. Their goal was to build stuff here and sell it for use in working railroads, not tourism lines, but actually hauling passengers and freight and regular revenue service. That never worked out in the U.S. There were a few small railways in Great Britain that worked that way, and one of them, the Romney Heights and Dymchurch, at least on the southeast coast near Dover, is still in operation, hauling commuters to and from work, I believe. Okay, now they've back down to the station, and the passenger cars that were pulled out by hand are sitting down there and waiting to be coupled up. The cars we started running with back when this was taken were borrowed from the Milwaukee Zoo. They are Sandley coaches that were built here. They are 3 compartment coaches. They can each carry 12 adults or fewer adults and a bunch of kids. This run was photographed empty. Later on, there are scenes taken at other times when there were passengers on the train. You're looking on the right there at the side of the car shop where those cars were probably built. And here on the left is the loco shop. You had a picture of the interior before. And we're heading out towards the main part of the run that is out in the woods. There's the lead we came down off, the engine came down off from the turntable in front of the roundhouse. And now we're off in the woods. I'm going to hang up, Ron. I hope you can still hear me. The trip is about 1 mile and 4/10 each way. It's mostly wooded like this. This right-of-way was hand and horse graded back in about 1855 for the original right-of-way for the standard gauge train running between Milwaukee and Minneapolis-St. Paul. They moved to a better alignment later on, and this right-of-way was abandoned, and Norman Sandley and his father Elmer obtained it inexpensively and moved their railway here at Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, from Janesville, Wisconsin, where they had started it. Some of the neighbors in Janesville complained that steam train was too noisy on the weekends when they were trying to sleep. So the railway left. Norman and his father Elmer both were Chicago Northwestern steam locomotive engineers, and Elmer in World War I served in France, operating steam trains over there, supporting the troops. The engine's pretty smoky here. I'm not sure if that's because it's first run in the morning or some bad coal. I don't think it's usually quite that bad. This engine can pull those three compartment coaches full of people. It's about the maximum it can haul on the steepest part of the railway, which isn't that steep, but it's a little engine. We just passed a place where they added some ballast, real fine granite. Now we're going past what's called camp siding. It's about halfway down the main line. And this is actually a different train because I think you'll see passengers in it now. Nope, not yet. Later. Try this one. There we have people. In the first year or two when this was in operation, beginning before this video was taken, but continuing on a while, all the ties on the main line were replaced. That's about 5,000 ties. Here there's a lot of that new ballast spread. In fact, you can't even see the ties. But they'd spread it and then lift the rail and tamp the stuff under. There you can see the ends of the ties. The stone came from a quarry nearby that cut this real hard rock and used for building construction and also for, I believe, lining retorts where they melt metal. And the waste was this fine powdery stuff. And Riverside and Great Northern got it real cheap to use as ballast. It wasn't ideal, but it was cheap, and they couldn't afford anything better at the time. Here we're down at the other end, I believe. Yeah, I have to because there's a double track there. We're about to turn the locomotive on the turntable at the western end of the railway, cleverly called Western Springs. Here the engine's being run onto the turntable. It is a turntable in a pit there behind the weeds. Looks like Bill Coster is the conductor, and he's turning the loco so the engineer doesn't have to get in and out. This engine was perhaps built in Janesville, otherwise it was built here, but either way it was built by the Sandleys. It was sold to the Milwaukee Zoo. And when their trains got too big for it, they got some 442s, which had about twice the tractive effort, and this engine was just sitting idle. And so the Preservation Society was able to get it back from the zoo. Eventually, I think they purchased it, but at this point it was on loan, put back into operation to operate the Sandley Demonstration Railroad. This track was actually built, intended to be a test track and a demonstration track for the trains they were hoping to sell. but it only worked out that places like zoos and some wealthy individuals bought them for that sort of use. They were never used in any kind of general transportation to haul passengers between towns or freight between sources and actual destinations. And it just never seemed to make sense here in the U.S. Even the 3-foot narrow gauges eventually petered out, and they were trying to popularize this at the time those narrow gauges were going away. This is sitting in one of the coaches looking at the engine and the gauges in the back of the engine there. Another view down the main line. Engineer sitting on the end of the tender. To his left, he has a opening to chute to the coal area. That's where he gets the coal out. In this video earlier when they were firing it up, you might have noticed how small the firebox door is. Well, there's camp siding with a little house that was there and a storage shed. Firebox door is narrow, so is the actual fire. The grate and everything in the firebox is very narrow because a 440, it has to fit between the drivers. And so it's inside the frame between the drivers, and there's just not much width there. That's the reason the steam locos went to having trailing trucks with firebox behind the drivers. Is to get a bigger grate area, a bigger fire, make more power. Here we're back at the station on the east end of the railroad. This area is called Hyde Park. It is quite park-like. Again, it's the Sandleys' interest in the British railways, I think, that got the name for it. But the station, the depot, is actually said to be patterned after one in Arizona or New Mexico, I think on the Santa Fe, but one of the major railroads. Okay, here the engine's been decoupled. It's been run around the back of the station away from where the passengers load on and off at the front of the station. It's going to be turned to take the train out for the next trip. So the engine's turned around at either end of the run, always runs forward, pulling the train. This turntable eventually broke down and had to be replaced. This one was pretty much all wood. The new one's steel and much heavier, so it takes about twice as much force to turn it. I volunteered up there for a while. I painted a number of the buildings, including this water tank. Okay, there the engine's been turned. It ran down between the car shop on the left and local shop on the right to get back onto the main line, and now it's backing up towards the train to couple up again. The train does use air brakes, but it's not as sophisticated as a Westinghouse brake system. So they're working air pressure against spring-loaded loading that applies the brakes, and air pressure releases it. It looks like Kevin Rice there running the engine. He rebuilt this at one point later on. He rebuilt the Western Maryland engine that runs, from what's the town in Maryland? Anyway, it goes up the hill into Pennsylvania. He rebuilt that Western Maryland engine too, and he runs it, or he did run it at least a number of summers. I think he's still running it in summers. And then they showed some of the plants growing around the place, which is as Bill said, he didn't know what they were. He's not a botanist, and neither am I. But anyway, perhaps this is a good time to stop it. So I'm sorry the sound didn't work out. I sent Ron an email that lists where you can find this online, and you can find maps and things, and you could look it up later and watch it. So I'm going to stop this video right now.
Okay.
Oh, that was this. Let's see. Okay, this is the current Riverside and Great Northern website. www.dellstrain.com. Dells Train. It's Wisconsin, Dells, Wisconsin. They have quite a bit of info there. Here's 82 repainted. They covered up the number and they put a name on the side of the cab. This is its sister. This is number 98 in blue. One of the members, volunteer and members of the society, owns that, last I heard anyway. Same design. On the right we have Tom Thumb. That's a steam automobile engine from, I think, a locomobile. And it chain drive down to one of the axles. And a vertical boiler built here at the Riverside and Great Northern. Here's somebody oiling 82. And here we have kid pulling on the chain to fill the tender water tank from the stationary tank there. It looks like it needs paint again. Endless job painting stuff. Here are some pictures with orange 2-compartment coaches that they're using more of now. Apparently they sold more of the 2-compartment coaches than 3s, but we started with with 3s. Here's a side view of the station. This is a really neat building. There's like a passenger waiting area in here. There's a ticket sale window. And a ticket agent can sit in here and look out the bay windows and watch the train. You can turn the signal from red to green. The baggage compartment door. I'm not sure there's really a baggage room back there. But down here is a small lunchroom at the far end of the place. And up above is an apartment that one of the people who worked at the RNGN lived in for a number of years. Down at the very end of the track here is the newest building on the railroad. This was added later on, 1995 or so. It's a place to park more coaches because they got more coaches built and borrowed and bought and needed more space to store them. They didn't fit in the car shop anymore. So here's this 3-track car shed that's long enough for, I think, about 5 coaches of the 3-compartment type on each track. But let's see. It went that way. Okay. I have a pumpkin train. Here you can see the size of the coaches. They're not big, but there's 2 people can sit on each bench, 2 adults. I guess maybe that's all I have on this site. There are lots of pictures online if you search for Riverside and Great Northern. And at the same site, there's a history page. This is showing the trains when they first started out in Janesville, maybe the first day they were run. I think it's Elmer standing here, Norman's father. Norman was huskier and not as tall. This is one of their 442 Atlantics. They've gotten some of those back, and they hope to be using them starting this year. they have about twice the weight on the drivers and twice the tractive effort as the 440s, and they apparently have enough customers that most of the time they need longer trains. There's quite a bit of history about the railway here on this history page. The guy who welded the boilers, fabricated and welded the boilers, was Norman Thundercloud, who was one of the local Native American people who was certified in welding. I don't know that he's in this picture. This is a long time ago. This is Elmer, and this is his son Norman. When I knew Norman, he was about 70 years old. So he looks very young to me there, but that is one of the 440s there. And this is taken someplace on the Dell's property. So, let's see. This is Norman later on. He decided to build a steam-powered truck with an old steam car engine similar to what powered Tom Thumb. And some friends of mine own this. He had the boiler in it and the engine, but it wasn't plumbed. It wasn't completed. And the society sold it to my friends, Leo and Sharon. Sharon is actually Norman's niece, so there's a family connection there. And they've finished it with Kevin Rice's help, did the plumbing and stuff. And it turned out not to be too practical, but they have fun showing it at gas and steam shows, tractor shows, you know, the old farm equipment days sort of things. So it gets shown and run about 3 weekends a year. And Norman thought he was going to drive this around the world using indigenous fuels, which in the Middle East was supposed to be camel dung. So anyway, he had some fun ideas, some of which worked out and some didn't so well. This is sort of patterned after the old British lorries, freight hauling trucks from like 1910. And here's a picture of opening day ceremonies, I guess. Notice the station's already there. This is back looking at the roundhouse from up on the car shop roof. So there's the main line. There's the turntable, the roundhouse. This shed is used to store lubricants and stuff. And this is the side of the boiler shop. This is the side of the locomotive shop. This flat roof covered a boiler and stationary steam engine that powered overhead belt pulleys and shafting for belt drives to the equipment in the car shop. By the time they built the loco shop, which was later, they just used electric motor power right away. Let's see.
All right.
This is a map, Google map view of where the right-of-way is. Can't really see it here. It starts down here at the corner of N, and it changes from A to N as it goes around this curve. The railroad begins down here. The Hyde Park is down here, and it follows up through here and ends up here just short of where this road crosses. This is the full-size realigned main line. Hello, Ron.
Hey, Don, that's about it for now.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for looking. Let me just real quickly zoom in here at the yard area. And here's the visitor parking. Here's that new car shop. Here's the platform and the station. Up here is the turntable, loco shop, car shop, joinery, boiler shop, roundhouse, turntable. So anyway, we thank you for visiting my favorite little railroad. I think this area would be interesting to model with all of the trackage in here. All right, thank you. I don't know if you're still connected or gone, but I'm going to disconnect, I guess.
So that was a new technological challenge for us. I hope everybody realizes.
How do I unshare this?
So he may still keep talking because I don't think he can hear us. But it's weird because we can hear him, and at times we were talking to each other, and I have no idea. So that was the last of the content for today's meeting. Again, thank you, Bruce, for coming to give a presentation in person. I appreciate that. Chuck from New Jersey was great. Don, as you know, volunteered here. So he wanted to share that, his experience in live steam in Wisconsin. I think it's pretty cool. I've never, to me, it's like, oof, almost a job. Like, really? Like, imagine Wisconsin in the winters and that track. Bruce was worried that the track on the foam looked like that. Imagine what that guy's track looks like after the winter. But but thanks everybody for coming and appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next meeting in a couple months. Hopefully back at the Weathersfield Police Station. Hopefully not here all the whole time, but we'll see. All right, thanks everybody. See, look at that. Look at that. What the heck is going on there? What the heck?